Terror in Barcelona. Spanish police search for clues after a van barrels down a busy walkway, killing 13 and injuring dozens. We're learning about the American victims. A senator's reaction.
We would challenge the president to continue to be able to speak very clearly and a one consistent voice on that, and that helps everyone.
James Lankford of Oklahoma says President Trump is muddying the water in wake of the deadly violence in Charlottesville. We'll tell you why. Down syndrome in Iceland. Pro-life activists say the country is committing genocide against children with disabilities. And from seminary to wolf sanctuary, we'll go deep inside a Brazilian forest with some unusual nighttime visitors. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, August 18th, 2017. Good evening, and thank you for joining us for News from a Catholic Perspective. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. The U.S. State Department says at least one American was killed and one injured in the attacks in Barcelona and Cambrils, Spain. It comes as another suspect has been arrested. Spain is reeling after one of the most violent days the country has seen in well over a decade. A moment of silence today in Barcelona, as anti-terror operations are underway in Spain. A van mowed down dozens of people during Thursday's deadly attack in Barcelona. Police say they killed 5 suspected terrorists. A shootout occurred after authorities say those suspects knocked down several people with an Audi A3. Catalonia's interior minister says the attackers were initially suspected to be armed with suicide belts, but police later determined the belts were fake. Officials say they believe the attack there, along with the house explosion in another city Wednesday, were related to the deadly events in Barcelona. Witnesses described the terrifying moment.
I heard this crashing noise, I heard screams, I turned around and looked, and it was just like, seemed like an avalanche of hundreds of people started to run, so instinctively I started to run, and 10 seconds later I just decided I need to stop, I need to know why I'm running and where am I running to.
In front of me I see everyone from the bars and the restaurants just start running, like looking absolutely terrified. To which I did the same.
Tonight, the world is stopping to honor the victims of the attack, the deadliest in the country since the Madrid train attack in 2004. Another attack, this time in Finland, where a man stabbed 8 people in the western city of Turku, killing 2 of them. Police were able to detain the man. Authorities are looking for more potential suspects. Steve Bannon is out as President Trump's chief strategist. The White House says Bannon and Chief of Staff John Kelly mutually agreed today would be Bannon's last day. He was a key advisor in Trump's campaign, but sparred with other advisors, including the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. It comes as President Trump spends the day at Camp David to discuss U.S. strategy in Afghanistan. President Trump will spend this weekend at his retreat in Bedminster, New Jersey. The backlash over his response to the violence in Charlottesville continues to dog him, and he's finding no comfort in his own party. Correspondent Mark Irons reports from the White House. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Wyatt. Prominent Republicans are openly questioning the president's moral leadership, including Tennessee Senator Bob Corker, who was once considered by Trump for a cabinet position.
I don't think that the president has appropriately spoken to the nation on this issue.
Senator Bob Corker of Tennessee, chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, delivering a stinging rebuke of his one-time ally.
We're at a point where there needs to be radical changes take place at the White House itself. It has to happen. I think our president needs to take stock of the role that he plays in our nation.
But President Trump is berating his critics and defending monuments to Confederate icons. The controversy engulfing him comes after racial violence at a white supremacist rally in Charlottesville. Critics denounced the president's initial reaction when he blamed both sides.
We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence on many sides. On many sides.
Republican Tim Scott, the Senate's only black Republican, says the president was wrong to draw a moral equivalency between white supremacists and protesters. He says Trump's response complicates the administration's moral authority. And today on ABC's Good Morning America, the mother of Heather Heyer, who was killed in the violence, says she will not speak with the president after his combative remarks. Heyer was killed when a driver rammed a car into a crowd of people protesting the white nationalist. In the latest terror attack in Spain, a vehicle was also used to kill people. The president came out quickly in response to that tragedy, most recently saying on Twitter, "Radical Islamic terrorism must be stopped by whatever means necessary."
Correspondent Mark Irons reporting at the White House. Thanks, Mark. And another Republican senator says President Trump muddies the water when he assigns blame for the violence to anyone other than white nationalists. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi spoke with that lawmaker today. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Wyatt. Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma says the president needs to be very consistent and clear in opposing white supremacists and other hate groups. I spoke with the Republican earlier today and asked him what he makes of President Trump's response to Charlottesville.
Yeah, what I've said is all statements about race needs to be exceptionally clear. And what I would hope for the president is he would make very, very clear statements that Nazism and that ideology was dealt with as a world and as our nation with blood and treasure back in the 1940s. We confronted that as a part of our old history, and to say that it's been proved morally bankrupt and wrong, and we need to be very unequivocal on that. So we've tried to speak very clearly from our office. We would challenge the president to continue to be able to speak very clearly and a one consistent voice on that, and that helps everyone.
Some Americans are saying you need to take down all the Confederate statues, including here at the Capitol in your home state of Oklahoma. What do you make of that?
So there's a lot of conversation about that, quite frankly, when you deal with all statues and monuments and things related to Confederacy and to slave owners and such. That's each community needs to be able to look at that and be able to evaluate it. We can't deny our history. This is a part of our history, and there is something valuable to be able to show to our children in the days past. This is what America used to be like. These are the things that we dealt with. Here's how far that we have come, because we have come a very long way in race relations, but it's unfinished business. When I look at schools, that is a little bit different to me, because by nature, the definition of a school and why you name a school is you want the children to emulate that person when they grow up and to be a good role model. So I think it's exceptionally important that school naming specifically relates to somebody that you want the students in that school to be able to emulate. So I think in each case, you've got to be able to look at it and determine what's the function of this, and to be able to determine not that we're wiping out history, but how do we learn from history.
I want to ask you, as a former Christian youth minister for many, many years, the people that we saw in Charlottesville were many young people. How can faith leaders eliminate the scourge of racism?
So the best thing that faith leaders can do is speak out and encourage, and to be able to deal with how do they mentor, how do they disciple. For me as a church leader in the past, I would tell you, I was amazed at the number of times I talked to parents, and parents said, well, really the biggest influencer are the media, or the biggest influencer are rock stars, or somebody that they see on social media. That's not true. The biggest influencer for children are their parents. Right behind that, if they're involved in the church, is the church and the leadership there, because the spiritual connection for an individual is one of the deepest connections you can possibly have. And so I would encourage the church to speak out from the pulpit, to speak out in their small group classes and their Bible studies. There are multiple opportunities as you talk about Scripture, to be able to talk about race relations and how God has created all flesh, and how each person's created in the image of God and has value and worth. We need to continue to be able to repeat that basic value to individuals and to the next generation.
Senators Lankford and Tim Scott are urging all Americans to be part of the solution, what they're calling Solution Sundays. It's simple. They're suggesting inviting a family of a different race over to your house for Sunday dinner or lunch. Wyatt?
Correspondent Jason Calvi at the Capitol. Thanks, Jason. The Red Cross says the chances are getting smaller every day to find survivors of massive mudslides in Sierra Leone's capital. It comes as the government begins to bury the dead, now reaching 450 people. Funerals began yesterday. Another 600 people remain missing, and now there's a new danger after a large crack opened where residents were told to evacuate. The country is pleading for international help. Venezuela's pro-government assembly takes over the powers of the opposition-led Congress. It comes as Vice President Mike Pence arrives back to the U.S. after a week-long visit to Latin America. Pence made a final stop in Panama before returning home early to attend a meeting with President Trump on national security. The vice president also visited Colombia, Argentina, and Chile. On his trip, Pence urged Latin American leaders to put more pressure on Venezuela, which many fear is on the brink of civil war or even a dictatorship. Joining us now is Anna Quintana, a policy analyst at the Heritage Foundation, where she focuses on Latin America. So, Anna, will Latin American countries heed Vice President Pence's warning about Venezuela, and do you think they could actually pressure them to make some changes in Venezuela?
I think Latin America recognizes that Venezuela and addressing the crisis in Venezuela is a significant priority for the Trump administration. And I think it's a priority for the region as well. We have a 20-country-strong coalition right now at the Organization of American States willing to stand alongside the U.S. in addressing Venezuela.
Let's take a listen to what Vice President Pence had to say when he was in Chile.
Venezuela is sliding into dictatorship. And as President Donald Trump has said, the United States will not stand by as Venezuela crumbles.
So Anna, now having listened to that, what do you think the U.S. can do about the situation in Venezuela? Because we're not going to invade them, are we?
No, of course. I mean, the United States has a plethora of other economic and diplomatic options, right? So we do have the Organization of American States. We have the 20-country strong coalition that we should work alongside with to continue applying pressure to the Venezuelan government. We need to ask and demand strict standards for them of improving their behavior, of cutting back the dictatorship, right, and returning Venezuela back to a democracy.
As a result of all that bad behavior, there's so many human rights problems, I should say. The United States Human Rights Commission is expected to release a full report at the end of August, including all of these people who have been detained, more than 5,000 over the summer. What is going on there in terms of the opposition? What's happening with the people there?
Well, there is a significant closing of political space. The opposition is being incredibly repressed. I mean, you mentioned the thousands of arrests. These are people who've been detained, and now there are also over 300 people who continue remaining in prison, and they report being tortured and being beaten, and their human rights are just not being respected at all. So I think this report is going to be quite significant.
It is going to be significant. We're going to continue to follow this, just noting that and all the problems for everyday Venezuelans as well. Anna Quintana with the Heritage Foundation, thanks so much for talking with us.
Thank you.
The Vatican press office says the Pope is worried about the attacks in Barcelona and is closely following the developments.
Pope Francis is praying for all the victims of the attack and has expressed his closeness to all the Spanish people and all the families of the victims.
The attack comes as security in and around Rome is already heightened. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register, joins us. Edward, the Holy Father sent a message to Barcelona's cardinal. What did it say?
The Pope has condemned what he called the cruel and inhuman blind violence that struck Barcelona and said it was a grave offence to the Creator. But he also had a lot of words of comfort to the victims, said he was very close to them, and expressed his deepest sympathy to the victims' families. But it was the second, actually, telegram that was sent out. There was another earlier one sent out yesterday, which really shows the seriousness with which the Vatican has taken this atrocity.
The Vatican is a big target for ISIS. ISIS has threatened the Vatican before. How is security around the Vatican following the attack?
It's pretty much the same as it usually is, Wyatt. In fact, it's perhaps even less because there are fewer people in Rome during this time of year. But I understand that the Italian authorities had a big meeting this morning, an emergency meeting, which probably included the Vatican authorities too, to step up security, perhaps behind the scenes. But they do take this very seriously, and we've seen ever since the Paris attacks armed guards around the churches and around the Vatican.
Authorities say they've detained 3 Moroccans and a Spaniard in connection with the Barcelona attacks. So like Spain, Italy has seen a huge influx of number of migrants landing on its shores. Is Italy facing a problem of radicalized Muslims plotting acts of terror?
Well, this is the great concern, where there have been many migrants coming into Italy, but often they don't actually stay here. They go on to other parts of Europe. But there were reports last month from Interpol that 700 ISIS fighters had escaped Iraq and Syria and had found their way to Kosovo and were being radicalized there and equipped there to commit attacks in Europe and Italy in particular. And that's, of course, only about an hour's flight away. So there's a lot of concern here that these attacks could be coming, and they feel it's perhaps not just a case of if, but when.
Sure. Well, it sounds like at least the Italian Vatican authorities continue to coordinate just in case for any potential attack. Edward Penton, Rome correspondent for EWTN's National Catholic Register, thanks so much for talking with us.
Thanks, Wyatt.
Coming up, a member of the Dutch Parliament explains why he's campaigning against euthanasia in his country where it's legal. Plus, preparing for the solar eclipse, a warning from doctors before millions of Americans prepare to view a rare spectacle. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. The Fellowship of Catholic University Students, or FOCUS, is expanding to 15 new campuses this upcoming school year, including Bowling Green and Western Michigan. FOCUS is a campus outreach ministry and helps students grow in their faith. The group has more than doubled its campus presence since 2011. You can see a complete list of all the added schools by heading to catholicnewsagency.com. The Netherlands legally approves a rare double euthanasia, that according to a Dutch newspaper, which says two 91-year-olds submitted a request to be euthanized together. The Netherlands was the first country in the world to legalize euthanasia back in 2002. Lauren Ashburn spoke with a member of the Dutch parliament who is campaigning against the practice, saying the right to life is under threat.
Joining us is Kees van der Staaij via Skype from the Netherlands. He is a member of the Dutch parliament. Thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
First off, can you describe what the climate is like in the Netherlands as the result of these laws allowing euthanasia and assisted suicide?
What we see in our country, that there is an enormous emphasis on autonomy and self-determination. So we see that more and more euthanasia and assisted suicide is claimed at the doctor as a right. Or there is pressure from the family to practice euthanasia.
In your op-ed, you write that the Dutch government often speaks out when fundamental human rights are under threat around the world. Now, the fundamental right to life seems to be under threat in the Netherlands. It's time for others to speak out about the Dutch culture of euthanasia. I know that there are thousands of physicians or hundreds of physicians who have written letters. Are you asking the international community to intervene?
I think it's very important that there is a good dialogue also with the Netherlands on this issue. I see that in different states, also in the United States, the discussion is going. And it's first a warning to all countries to see in Holland that there is a real slippery slope. It starts with the situation with illness at the end of the life, cancer, for example. But that is not the finish. The next step is people with dementia. We see it now in Holland.
There are efforts to legalize a euthanasia pill in the Netherlands currently. Is there a political or popular will to fight this?
There is, but it's also our society is divided on this point. There are people that are very furious when you are against it, when they say, why are you as a politician saying no to what I am willing? It's my own choice to do. But others, and I support that voice, are saying, but it's also the task of a government to protect human life.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and shedding light on the euthanasia issue in the Netherlands. Kees van der Staaij, Dutch Member of Parliament.
Thank you very much.
On Monday, millions of Americans will get to see a total solar eclipse, and doctors are warning about the dangers of not protecting your eyes.
Just putting on sunglasses isn't, even dark sunglasses, they just don't have the proper filter. So our instinct is to wear sunglasses, and it's you can't trust that instinct. You have to have the special filters of the eclipse glasses.
Without the special glasses, rays from the sun can cause permanent damage. Monday's eclipse is expected to be the most viewed eclipse in history. Up next, shocking statistics on Down syndrome and abortion in Iceland. Pro-life activist Lila Rose reacts. Plus, wolves at a former seminary. We'll tell you what the priests think about it. Welcome back. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. Iceland's controversial practice of promoting women to get an abortion after positive test results for Down syndrome is back in the spotlight. That after a recent CBS News program saying Iceland is supposedly eliminating Down syndrome.
My understanding is that we have basically eradicated almost Down syndrome from our society, that there is hardly ever a child born with Down syndrome in Iceland anymore.
Our next guest is a well-known pro-life activist who believes this practice in Iceland is genocide. Joining us now via Skype from the San Francisco Bay Area is Lila Rose, the founder and president of Live Action, a human rights organization dedicated to ending abortion. So Lila, what is your reaction first off to the CBS News report that indicates many babies are being aborted simply because they're likely to have Down syndrome?
It's heartbreaking, Wyatt. We're learning about what is effectively a genocide of a whole group of people in Iceland, and it's happening in other countries across the world. It's happening in the United States to a degree as well, where children, just because of having Down syndrome, are being targeted and killed. They're not eliminating Down syndrome as a condition. They're eliminating people with Down syndrome. They're killing off a whole group of people that are given the same right to life by God that you and I have, people that have dignity and that should be cherished and loved and celebrated, not killed.
What kind of message do you think this sends to people who have Down syndrome or just other disorders?
Well, I think it's a clear message to people with Down syndrome that, especially in Iceland, for the few that have been born, there's just been a couple each year, that you are a mistake, you're not welcome here. And that's exactly the wrong message to be sending to other human beings. Suffering or conditions that a child may face, or whether it's a genetic condition or other disabilities, these are not things that should warrant their death sentence. These are things that should invite the care and the support of families, of parents, of medical professionals, and of communities.
In the report, they say having children with Down syndrome causes pain for the children and the families, and that's why most people abort their children. What would you say to the people of Iceland?
We can't be killing children because they experience pain. Death is not the answer. We find solutions to pain. And this is exactly the line of thought that eugenicists in the early 20th century, like Margaret Sanger, who founded the biggest abortion chain, Planned Parenthood, had. They wanted to, they claimed they were eliminating suffering, but they were actually killing off whole groups of people that they deemed unfit to live. And those who were disabled or who had conditions like Down syndrome were considered not fit to live. That's completely the wrong way to look at other human beings. It's not our right, just because you might think you're stronger or less disabled, to kill off others that seem weaker. And after all, Wyatt, we all have disabilities. We all have challenges in life. Suffering is part of life, but we should be uplifting each other instead of looking at those that are weakest to be killed.
It's such a powerful message that you have there, and a good response to this disturbing report. Lila Rose, founder and president of Live Action, thanks so much for talking with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yesterday, Lauren Ashburn asked for your personal stories about family members with Down syndrome. We thank you for your comments. Here are two. Lori Acuna says, Marty Gomez is the best uncle ever. He has Down syndrome and is a blessing to everyone he comes in contact with, and it is because of him I have been teaching special education for the past 20 years, where many more children with Down syndrome have blessed my life. And Rob Miller, my son has DS. He is loving and a joy to have around. He adds, not long ago, a very holy man from our parish approached and said, I don't know if any of us will make it to heaven, but he's going. Your son will be there. Tonight on EWTN ProLife Weekly, Catherine Zeltner talks to Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. He's urging a federal appeals court to overturn an order halting the state from cutting Medicaid funding to Planned Parenthood.
Well, look, this is our money. This is taxpayer dollars. You know, people have trouble funding this stuff anyway, but particularly if they're going to violate ethical and medical standards. And look, people can decide for themselves as they watch these videos. They're going to see the truth.
You can see more of Catherine's interview with Ken Paxton tonight at 11 p.m. Eastern on EWTN. ProLife Weekly re-airs Sunday morning at 10. Finally tonight, deep in a Brazilian rainforest lies a former Catholic seminary with some unusual nighttime visitors, rare maned wolves. The seminary at Caracas was founded in 1774 and closed in 1968. The buildings now serve as an inn. The religious sanctuary has become a refuge for the wolves, which are known for being fierce and showing their teeth as a sign of aggression. The priests enjoy an increase in visitors eager to see the wolves enjoying a nightly feast. And we thank you for watching this week. For the entire EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We'll be back Monday with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless.